Hey everybody, it's Professor Snart checking in. Okay, so we have had our first go-round with our first unit here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, a large part of my, philosophy of design here is really to make sure that everyone is feeling kind of comfortable just with navigating the course, do some basic setup stuff, and then has a sense of like who are the folks in the class with us, so we feel like a class, not just individuals kind of, emailing stuff back and forth. So we really are not into the content per se of our class, but we've just done some introductions. So again, Unit 1 setup where we're just creating our portfolio using Google Sites. Hopefully you found that fairly intuitive to use, or maybe you have lots of experiences with that already. And then just building a first page in that site, a kind of about me or introductions page. And as I say here, you can always move that, so it doesn't have to be the first page that we arrive to as your portfolio develops as we go through the class. And then using the tool in Blackboard, the discussion board tool, so everyone can post their URL to their portfolio site. It's just a nice way of kind of collecting all those in one place. Makes it easier for people to visit those sites. And then, of course, it enables the reply component here. So that brings us back to our due dates. So another quick look here at our due date situation. Again, something to just get used to as part of our kind of course dynamic. And you can build reminders in your phone or kind of put things on your schedule, your day planner, if you use paper, which is still what I do, and rely on heavily. So if I lose it or I don't have my phone with my calendar, that's not good news for me. But anyway, our split due date system. This first unit, just to give us a little more time, is a Thursday-Friday split. So Thursday, every main thing in a unit would be due. In this case, building your portfolio website, and then that About Me page and posting the URL so we could visit it. And then by Friday, technically end of the day, but I like to encourage people to do things earlier, we're getting in and doing the reply component. You'll notice as we move forward then, we're going to have a slightly different system just with that Thursday, giving us a little less time to complete the next work, but a slightly more time to do any reply component. So again, I've tried to keep it pretty regular. We have that Wednesday-Friday split. And so now you might be done this part of it, right? So you still have some replies to do, but there's nothing to keep you from starting this. So you may end up feeling like there's some overlap sometimes between finishing up one unit and actually starting the next. I don't recommend working ahead, but you may in fact feel like you're doing sort of the tail end of one as you begin the next, and I think that's a pretty effective way to work. Okay, so now we're looking at Unit 2. Again, that Wednesday due date for any main work, and then looking for Friday for replies. Or earlier, if enough people are doing this by Monday, Tuesday, you can easily get in and do the required replies by maybe even that Wednesday or the Thursday. So it's always possible to work a little bit in advance of the due dates. Okay, so a quick note then, as is posted in our class, that down in Unit 10, obviously still a few weeks away, you are going to be required to attend what I've called a poetry event, for lack of a better term, but we're trying to take this as I guess in some ways as generically as possible, since I know like pure, true poetry readings are sometimes few and far between, depending on where you are, your schedule, and that kind of stuff. But I am asking you to attend some kind of a poetry or poetry-related event. I've had people go to Shakespeare plays, for example, kind of poetry-related. Certainly actual poetry readings are really good. Oftentimes just an author reading will work if that author happens to be a poet, even if the reading isn't poetry per se. So again, we're being a little flexible here, but just going to a concert is not really what we're looking for. And again, it's weeks away, but it's good to be on the lookout now because you don't have to wait until way down here at Unit 10 to actually attend the event. You're just going to be reporting back on it by Unit 10. So if you find something like next week to go to, that would be perfect. And to help us out, I've also built this little page here, Poetry Events. So as we discover things, and of course as I find events on campus or out in the community, I'll start posting them. But you can also visit our document here, and if you discover something like just by happenstance through a flyer in the newspaper, social media, whatever it happens to be, you can populate this document as well with events that even if you aren't planning to attend or couldn't, maybe others might be interested. So don't be shy if you find something. And I will sort of curate the list here only in as much as formatting or maybe organizing things go. So obviously, if you find something here, you want to double check like dates and info and location and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to double check everything like that, but I certainly will try to, clean up any formatting or make things as kind of user-friendly as possible. So keep your eye out for events. Even if you're not going to attend them, maybe add them to our list because somebody else. And obviously keeping your eye out for yourself so that by or before Unit 10, you've attended some kind of poetry event that you can report back on for Unit 10. If you're unsure about an event and if it counts or doesn't count, you can always be in touch with me and we'll talk a little bit about it and make a decision, okay? So that takes us into Unit 2. So I like to always start with our unit objectives, remembering that these are course objectives pulled from our what we call the active course file, which means that any English 1152 that you take will have these same objectives. These aren't just for our particular class or section. These are for any English 1152. So it's always good to keep in mind like the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve in our course, and then the specific things that we're doing on a unit by unit basis. So we understand how those are kind of contributing to that overall scene that we're looking at. Quick brief survey, right, just about why you took this particular course. I'm personally interested. I also happen to be the chair of Lit, Creative Writing and Film, and so it's really helping us as a program or set of programs to find out like why people are taking these courses. It helps us with marketing, helps us to more effectively align our classes for transfer for different schools. So again, your feedback or input on this is really, really valuable. It should only take you like a minute or two. Okay, so our first reading/listening to do here, Hip Hop by Mos Def. We have then a collaborative slide deck that we're going to look at. All right, which means that you can see the slide deck unfolding here. There's nothing there yet. Oh, except for Claudia's gotten in there. Good job. At least as I'm recording this, right? So just a bunch of terms with no definitions. So you can see the slide deck just by clicking it right in Blackboard. But ultimately, you want to go into the slide deck, and we're all using the same document, so do be careful that you're not accidentally deleting or kind of like screwing something up in there. We can recover that, so it's not like life or death, but just be careful about where you're adding stuff. You are going to add 3 definitions that have not been defined yet, so it behooves you to get in there early. Behooves. A little vocab for you there. And just make sure that you include your name. Like so, as Claudia's done, helpfully. Notice she's got, right, a brief definition. Fog, the poem, is a free verse poem. And then she's got her name. And Claudia, if you're watching this, which you should be, I might even go back in here and give us a little couple lines from Sandberg showing how it works as a free verse, right? It doesn't follow that rhyme or regular meter. But that's good. And if there happens to be a source maybe where you got that definition, you could throw that in too. And, okay. So what we'll have after we're all been in there is a really nice deck of lots of poetry-related vocabulary words, clearly related to, right, again, that bigger picture objective that we're going for. Some of the terms are probably ones you've heard of before, maybe you've heard of but haven't really understood definitions or you couldn't point to examples. And then other terms are a little more niche or jargony, but those are useful to know as well. So we kind of cover the gamut. Okay. So the other assignment here, and they can really be going on in parallel, you don't have to do these separately, it uses a little tool that I like to use pretty frequently called Padlet, where we have our digital corkboard here. So the idea for this Padlet is that you would use your phone to actually visit this URL, so open the browser on your phone and just type this in as an address, and it'll take you to this, again, digital corkboard. And you can't see it, it's off my screen, but over to the bottom right, there's a little add post button, or you can just double click anywhere like it says, again using your phone. So you're out there in the world doing your normal thing, and we're looking for examples of basically like poetry in plain sight or hiding in plain sight. So you don't want to like pull your poetry book off the shelf and then open it to a poem and take a picture. We already know that's where poetry exists, up hidden on the shelf. We're not so interested in that. You also don't just want to take a picture of something that is like quote unquote poetic or beautiful or touching or emotional. It needs to be actual like words in a line. It doesn't need to be in a book, but it has to be actual like text. Again, people have found this on signs, on posters, on billboards, on like advertising outside of businesses. And especially we're looking for like poetry that's not really presenting itself as poetry necessarily. I know it's kind of a fuzzy area, but we don't want that textbook stuff. And we don't want just generic like, oh, I think this is a poetic kind of a moment where two people are holding hands or whatever. We want that space in between. We want to find where poetry, even though we think it's in some ways this really marginal thing that we never run into, is actually all around us all the time, which is again why we do this as a mobile assignment. So don't sit at your computer and just Google poetry in the world and then post something. It needs to be an actual thing that you discover in your actual life, okay? The other piece of this assignment then, the slide deck, is to make sure that once you've done your definitions on the actual shared slide, that you use this discussion board to just do an initial post where all you need to do is list the terms that you've defined. That's all you really need to do. You don't need to redefine them or anything like that. Just list those terms. So that's your initial post. And again, it just sort of sets us up to do this reply part because that initial post is really just like the SparksNote version of what you actually did on the slide deck, but it enables us to do the reply piece, which is really useful. Okay, again, that takes advantage of our double due date system. And so I always suggest, just to wrap things up here, that while you're probably working on maybe the tail end of one and the beginning of another, it's not a bad idea to kind of pop into some later units just to see what's going on. I don't suggest necessarily doing that work, but it just gives you a good sense. Maybe it's just my kind of way of thinking about things, of sort of like what's on the horizon. If it seems like something that's going to take you a long time, or if you have a busy week coming up for whatever reason, it's sort of good to know that this is what's on my plate a few weeks down the road, okay? So take advantage of the fact that our due dates are all laid out here and all the units are accessible, even though I'm really suggesting that you're just maybe finishing up one as you begin the next. Okay, so I look forward to your feedback in the little survey here and our slide deck definitions as they grow out, as people start doing that. And again, if you have questions, concerns, anything that's just kind of weird in the course, by all means, you can be in touch with me.